Just before we get started, I have set up a Discord for you guys to chat and suggest videos and ask me questions and other general Discordy sort of shit. I've never used it prior to this, so if I'm a bit slow on the uptake of how to use it, I'm sorry, but a few guys wanted me to set one up, thought it'd be a good idea, so I've gone ahead and done that. Link is in the description. Anyway, you guys seem to really want me to make a part 2 on all the Group S cars I missed in the last video. I'd advise checking out part 1 if you haven't already. It contextualizes a lot of what you're going to see about the cars in this video, but otherwise, let's just get back into it. It's fair to say that Mazda's foray into Group B wasn't showered in success. In fact, the Mazda Rally Team Europe received no financial backing from Mazda themselves when they decided to make the jump from Group 2 to Group B. The rear-wheel drive RX7 was introduced in 1984 when four-wheel drive had become the tried and tested method, and so Mazda was left in the dust. Changes to the design would be required. Four-wheel drive would obviously be the first thing on the list, but the RX7 S was most notable for featuring four-wheel steering. It also carried a naturally aspirated rotary engine supposedly able to do 450 brake horsepower, but is front mid-mounted, which was seen as a little strange to many as most cars featured the standard mid-engine design. However, it was mounted in this way for two reasons. One, it allowed for better weight distribution, and two, allowed for more predictable movement on all the different terrains found on the WRC. The S version of the RX7 also featured brand new wider body kits made out of lightweight composite materials. But as well as looking radically different to the vanilla RX7 at the time, a lot of people believed it looked too similar to the RS200 to be a coincidence. It may look similar when you blur your eyes, but there's honestly not much resemblance between the two at all. Only two prototypes were built, and it isn't known if they were identical, but judging by the fairly sparse interior, it's fair to deduce that the RX7 didn't get far into development before Group S was snatched away from them. Seat had a lot of hurdles to overcome in order to produce a successful rally car. Spain was experiencing troubles at the time, and so Seat had little money to work with in order to build the car. Four-wheel drive, which Seat knew they had to use in order to stay competitive, was still an expensive technology to implement which they simply couldn't afford. Therefore, a much cheaper yet less well-known method would be used to achieve four-wheel drive. Two engines. Hence the name Bimotor. Seat took their newly released Seat Ibiza and set to work. Two Porsche engines were fitted, one at the back and one at the front, which could do 125 horsepower each, so overall the car could do 250 horsepower, although later models were theorised to have engines of 150 horsepower each, so 300 horsepower total. But synchronising the engines became the main problem. The front engine would supposedly rev higher due to inertia, and the team supposedly had a lot of trouble syncing the transmissions. Cooling for the rear engine was also difficult to overcome, but eventually the radiator had to be fit with two air ducts mounted in the rear windows. Another strange thing about the Bimotor was the lack of lightweight materials. Of course, once again the reason is the lack of budget, but only the bonnet, rear hatch and arch extensions were made out of fiberglass. The rest was made out of steel. Even so, the car weighed just over 1,000 kilograms, which is quite modest. Many theorise that the Bimotor was a prototype for Group B and not Group S. However, the 200 car homologation requirement would make the Bimotor a terrible investment for Seat in Group B, as they would be completely impractical as road cars. While Seat was likely planning to build a car for Group S, the car never saw any real action outside of some championships in Spain itself, after Group S was canned. While the idea of twin-engined rally cars from the 1980s does sound incredible, one thing you have to remember is, when you have double the engines, you'll have double the amount of things to go wrong. The Opel Kadett rallying outings, like a lot of other cars, started during Group B and ended with Group S. Opel had been performing okay with the Manta B400, but the team knew that they, like a lot of other manufacturers, needed to introduce a brand new purpose-built four-wheel drive monster. So they took the Opel Kadett, also known as the Vauxhall Astra in UK, or the Holden Astra in Australia, or a whole number of other names, and they set to work. The front and rear were replaced with tubular space frames, and most of the body was constructed out of lightweight composites. The head of the project, Karl-Heinz Goldstein, however, believed that mid-engine cars weren't favourable, so went for a more traditional front-engine layout, which he felt would be much more favourable for less experienced drivers. By this point, the Kadett weighed a healthy 960 kilograms, but a lightweight 850 kilogram version was said to be in the works too. The team also messed around with the Cosworth engine. Superchargers only managed to bring the horsepower to around 325, but turbochargers surpassed 400. The team even sneakily tried out a pre-tuned turbocharged Ford engine, which they referred to as proof of concept, but was generally seen as a dumb move for PR. 4 prototypes were built and all saw action. 2 Opels competed in the Paris-Dakar Rally, and the other Vauxhall Astra competed in the British Open Rally Championship, but results were mixed. Group S seemed to be a ray of light for the company, however. A few modifications would have to be made to the engine in order to have it comply with the new regulations, but Opel still kept a hopeful mind. Then Group S ended, and so Opel canned the project. After a series of unsuccessful attempts at building a successful rally car, the dream was over. Lada's rally car, like a lot of others, had a development life cycle that spanned over the lives of both Group B and Group S and never saw any official racing in either category. They begun by taking the Lada Samara and began the modifying process, beginning with the subtitle of Eva being gifted. The engine was upgraded to a healthy 300 horsepower, and the exterior was remodelled to feature both front and rear clamshells. It also featured some striking components such as extractors on the fenders and of course the iconic twin spoilers for extra downforce. Of course, being 1980s communist Russia, funding was difficult to obtain for the project, but when the government saw how well produced the prototypes were, funding was secured. Overall, 20 to 30 models were built. However, it seems that Lada entered the story at just the wrong time. As the project was properly getting underway, Group B was scrapped and the Eva was flushed down the drain, and all progress was lost. Or was it? With the prospect of Group S, Lada had been modifying a Samara Eva to conform to these new regulations, now known as the Samara S-Proto. 50 more horsepower was injected, but only 1 prototype was built. Then Group S was axed, and so the S-Proto was also left without a cause. Once again, however, Lada found a use for it. The car was modified and fitted with a Porsche engine and drivetrain and went on to compete in the Paris-Dakar Rally and secured 5th in 1991. This version of the Samara, known as the T3, was supposedly a direct descendant of the Eva and the S-Proto, meaning the project did have some long-term use after all. Now there's one more car that I'd like to mention, the Peugeot Quasar. However, contrary to popular belief, this was not Peugeot's dive into Group S. If you've watched part 1, you'd of course know that. This was instead a Group B prototype. The reason we can confirm this is because concepts date all the way back to 1984, before Group S had even been thought about. But it's still an interesting car. The Quasar lifted the engine and a whole load of other components from the 205, but was created to show what the 205 would be like if there were no barriers. The boosted engine could now do 600 horsepower, which was way more than even the E2 could do. So why did people mistake it for a Group S prototype? Well, just look at it. This thing could quite easily pass for a crazy 90s supercar from the front with some amazing styling, most notably a completely glass roof. But the back even more so. Most of the mechanical components of the engine are left exposed, with the exhaust looking like a pair of foghorns. The interior is also a roller coaster. Red, 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 and I love it. I think it's equally obvious, however, that even if the Quasar was considered for Group S, where only 10 iterations would have been built, that it would still remain impractical, completely cost inefficient, and, well, a pipe dream. Seeing a Peugeot like this just hits home how far the brand has fallen since the 80s. It's kinda sad. Well, I believe that should do it. There are probably some more extremely obscure prototypes that I haven't talked about, but if I'm being honest, it wouldn't make for that good content. Other than that, yeah, I do think each and every one of the prototypes I've mentioned in both of these videos are insanely cool, and it's always a treat to see one of them in action. I'd also like to say once again that most of the info presented in this video are courtesy of the Group B Shrine. Be sure to visit their website if you'd like to learn more about any particular car on this list, and I'd like to say thanks for watching, goodbye.